Good evening to all. First of all, my excuses because my hypothalamus has played a bad trick on me. I was starving, and then I thought it took me to think that I have spare time, to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Sorry. And then I have to excuse myself as well because my colleague, Dr. López Peláez Casellas, has been the first in introducing an alien stuff here with his formula on economics. I'm going to introduce another alien material here, as it is biology or evolutionary studies and basically sociobiology and all those things that belongs to the field of the natural sciences. That don't seem too appropriate for this assembly here, but I hope that you will forgive me in the end. Okay. In his later years, Stephen Hawking, repeatedly warned about the dangers of humankind meeting an alien civilization. In his 2010 documentary series, Into the Universe, with Stephen Hawking, he suggested that alien civilizations sufficiently advanced to visit Earth may be hostile. Would you please? Yes. Such advanced aliens would perhaps become nomads, looking to conquer and colonize whatever planets they could reach, he said. Who knows what the limits would be? And in the 2016 documentary, Stephen Hawking's Favorite Places, Hawking reiterated his view. Please. Meeting an advanced civilization could be like Native Americans encountering Columbus. That didn't turn out so well. So, whatever we think of the authorized voice of Stephen Hawking for such warning, what we know of the evolution of matter and life on Earth, and what we know about both anthropology and history, makes the prediction very real. Assuming, of course, that the aliens follow the same trend of the behavior and development we have had here on Earth. Assuming that they are biologically evolved creatures with a biochemistry based on carbon, I will add two possible scenarios as a kind of mental experiment. The aliens, are a species biologically incompatible. That is, they do not belong either to the genus Homo or to the species Homo sapiens. In this case, there is little hope of us being considered of any value above the one that we assign to non-human animals on Earth, except that we hold the optimistic view that high technological evolution goes along with compassionate and friendly attitude towards less advanced creatures. In the very, very improbable case that they were in some way biologically compatible with us, could you please? Well, there is still the possibility that we may be submitted by their civilizatory endeavor and eventually become integrated somehow in it as a subject or citizen. This that you can see there is what, from the point of view of biology, means to be Homo sapiens or sapiens, and the drives, the primitive biological drives. That is the kin selection, that is our preference for our family and those that are close to us, the parental investment, which is explained by itself, I think, mating strategy, the status, hierarchy, basically, and then the territorial expansion and defense, and something which is also very important, which is contractual agreement. We are able to bargain and then to establish a contract and then to respect and to collaborate. This is really very important. As you can see, this is taken from Edward Wilson Consilience. Even in this case, it is possible that they will look with horror and astonishment at some of our practices concerning meals, sex, or social relationships, indiscriminately judging for what they see in a first encounter. This is, after all, what Amerigo Vespucci experienced in his first encounter with the Native Americans. All of them, both men and women, go about entirely naked, with no more covering for their private parts than when they were born. They observe no laws and execute no justice. They do not punish the evildoers. In their sexual intercourse, they have no legal obligation. In fact, each man has as many wives as he covets. The men are very sensual. The women are even more so than the men. I have deemed it best, in the name of decency, to pass over in silence their many arts to gratify their lust. Of course, I am looking at the question for what we know of the development of biology, that is, genes and culture, a concept that I will introduce, means in our Mother Earth. For as far as we know of history, empires have always been characterized by expansion through at first burst of conquest and submission of whatever tribes or nations they encountered, followed by a second calmer stage of integration and assimilation of the conquered, which led to the change of the nature of the empire itself. I need not mention the examples of the Chinese, the Roman, the Arab, the Spanish and Portuguese, or the English empires to support my claim here. As far as there is genetic compatibility, hybridization will emerge due either to lack of masculine or feminine partners, or the self-interest of the ruling classes in both conquerors and conquered, making bonds through marriages, or just by simple whim and chance of individuals looking for a mate, or perhaps all these conditions at once. This is what the history tells us, given the condition of genetic compatibility of the Homo sapiens. All the aforesaid preamble have the intention to show that whatever course of biology, that is the genes, and culture, that is the means, have brought Homo sapiens at the door of the third millennium, we cannot dispense with empires as the universal form of globalization and civilization. Indeed, Yuval Noah Harari, in his very popular and insightful work, Sapiens, aptly points out that empire has been the world's most common form of political organization for the last 2,500 years. Most humans during these 2.5 millennia have lived in empires. And very illuminatingly, whatever political utopianism may say, he continues, empire is also a very stable form of government. Most empires had found it alarmingly easy to put down rebellions. In general, they had been toppled only by external invasions or by a split within the ruling elites. And of course, not all the effects of empires have been negative. As Harari informed us, to color all empires black and to disavow all imperial legacies is to reject most of human culture. Imperial elites use the profits of conquest to finance not only armies and forts, but also philosophy, art, justice, and charity. A significant proportion of humanity's cultural achievement owe their existence to the exploitation of conquered populations. A remarkable fact not explicitly offered by Harari, but which can be logically derived from his affirmation that in general empires have been toppled by external invasion, is that the history of humankind from an evolutionary point of view has been, for the most part, a long string of empires succeeding one another as a way to extend and improve global interconnectivity. Empirically, as supported by facts and not ideologically unfulfilled prediction of either philosophy, like Hegel, for instance, or politics, like Marx, the real truth is that the world has progressed. There are two ways of thinking about progress. However, teleologically, consider such as a progress towards the advancement of humanity, or evolutionary considered. Will you explain? It only implies progress towards some goal or objective. The other, this is the theologically directed. The other implies only increasing design, increasing complexity, or any kind of continuous development without a particular goal or end point built in. In this respect, something which is so patent as the phylogenetic progression of life on Earth is the fact of the growing interconnectivity of humankind, from the isolation of people in continents cut off from one another to their present immediate connectivity. An interesting model of interpretation of this growing interconnectivity is provided by dataism, which is a modern, trend. This model of interpretation of interconnectivity distinguishes four major stages in the evolution of the so-called sapiens data processing system. Cognitive revolution, which started about 20,000 years ago, when the humans started imagining things that didn't really exist, but that allowed then the possibility of collaborating in some common beliefs or sense of identity. Agricultural revolution, the invention of money, and that is not necessarily capitalism, and globalization as well. Empires have been instrumental in the processes of leading to globalization, but it was the discovery of America that when this era really started, and the transatlantic empires of Spain and Portugal were the initiators of this new process. It is a well-known fact that processes of creation of the great administrative and political blocks, which we call empires, have always been preceded by a nationalistic phase. In this respect, the empires of Spain and Portugal offer an exemplary case, born both countries out of the struggle to attain a national state once they had unfettered themselves from the yoke of another empire, the Islamic one, and favored by the fortunate adventures of the Atlantic discoveries, they soon became accretors of territories and subject, exposing and submitting other people to their language, religions, socio-political views, and culture in general. From a cultural genetic point of view, this is the same as to say that they were platforms to export and impose elements of culture which we will term memes, and which those memes have colonized in different degrees and intensity the mind of their subjects. The term and concept of meme was coined by Richard Dawkins in his influential 1976 book, The Selfish Gene. Dawkins himself defined it as the basic unit of cultural, there's a diversion, but never mind. So the basic unit of cultural transmission or imitation. However, there are other definitions from a variety of standpoints. The exact extension and limits, well, you know that in general, today, the concept got vulgarized, and then today, when we think of memes, we think of quite a different thing. But the English Oxford Living Dictionary, for example, defines meme as an image, video, piece of text, etc., typically humorous, etc., etc. Everybody knows what the kind of memes is this. But originally, still, I mean, in sociobiology, it means this, or evolutionary studies. But there is not only that definition, that the minimal unit of the cultural transmission, but there are other definitions from a variety of standpoints. The problem is that the exact extension and limits of this unit is not clear. It's not like a phoneme, or which is never completely clear either. For a meme is not a discrete entity, just in the same way as the gene is not either. Well, this is another question, that the genes are not so discrete as we think they are in the end. It could be then a fact, a fake news, a chain letter, or a meme in the popular and best known sense of this, an image, video, etc. They share with genes their condition of being replicators in the world of thought, expressing and transmitting through minds and fulfilling the condition of any replicator, that is, variation, selection, and retention. As in the case of the genes, they do not go isolated, but team up, presenting themselves encapsulated in complexes with which they mutually support themselves in order to be successful. They give them rise to what in memetics is called memplexes. Could you please? Yeah, well. Which could be equated with cultural complexes, such as religion, political ideologies, or sciences. As to the result for the individuals who host them, that is, we, the real, our minds, memes and memplexes can be beneficial, inconsequential, or pathogenic. Defining the complex cultural system justifying the Iberian imperialism in memetic terms will be equivalent to track the creation and the functioning of a complex memeplex or perhaps a Google memeplex, which included religion, political and ethnic elements, traditions, many things, different things. Naturally, many of them belong to the memplexes proper to the incipient Western world, as defined by the following historical trends. Those would be general lines: the Judeo-Christian tradition, the influence of the Germanic ethos, the reaction against the threat of the Muslim invasion, and classical tradition as transmitted by the remnants of the Roman Empire. In many ways, the means, we have, this is the definition that I should have mentioned before, pervading the minds of the English and the Spanish subjects belonging to the both memplexes were identical or very similar. This is page, could you please go to the next one? Yes, but this is the, sorry. Then it is only natural that we may find many of them both in the legal and programmatic justification of the incipient imperialism of the time and in the ideas contained in Thomas More's Utopia. In what remains of this paper, I will surmise some of the ways in which the underlying ideas of Utopia and the juridical and ideological explanation of Iberian imperialism match. To start with, the very idea of utopia is biologically wired in the human mind, since both competition and cooperation involve separate biological programs mediated by a different set of biochemical pathways in the brain. These pathways, which basically are conducive to either a fight or flight, or tent and befriend responses, can be conditioned or decided by social interaction. The risks inherent to the first response and the benefits ensuing from the second became hypostasized in the religions appearing during and after the agricultural revolution as hell and heaven, respectively. This hypostatization is at the root of the utopic drive of the human mind, and the reason why the memplexes currently known as Buddhism, Christianity, or Islam are utopic inasmuch as they put the emphasis on an afterlife in which the current risks of fight and flight are eliminated, and a heavenly providence embodying the Ten and Befriend program fully takes care of everyone's needs. This would be an extreme form of utopia in which the risk is eliminated altogether. As such, it has been repeatedly proposed not only in religion, but in the real life as well, both as fictional or as sociopolitical desiderata. More realistic forms of utopia would be those early ones which increases the bias towards Ten and Befriend program, but does not eliminate completely the fight or flight one. Thomas More Utopia and the Iberian utopic justification of their territorial expansion belongs to the second type. Indeed, they do not eliminate the fight or flight phase, but posit it all as necessary to obtain a greater good. Hence, in Utopia, More does not disclaim territorial expansion at the cost of uncivilized people in order to accomplish certain rational and necessary objectives, such as the acquisition of unoccupied lands needed to support their surplus population. This is not very far from what we can see in the Imperial Endeavours of Portugal and Spain. The right to ownership and exploitation of the so-called terra nullius was conceded to the Catholic monarchs of Spain in 1493 by Pope Alexander VI in his bull Inter Caetera, on condition that the new subjects should be evangelized. It was at the heart of the Spanish endeavor. This was the foundation of which the Spanish leges de Indias relied. The Portuguese were little interested at the time in justifying their presence in the West Indies, since their main concern was to preserve the rights on the west coast of Africa and their route along it to the East Indies. Although they have taken nominal possession of Brazil as early as 1500, Pedro Álvarez Cabral, the Portuguese monarchy did not take charge of the land till 1530. Being then in the interim period an irregular penetration by particular in competition with French and English forces allied to the local Indians. But the Portuguese monarchy took it seriously to administer the Brazilian possession. It issued a legal document, the Regimento da Governador General, or the Regimento de Dom Tomé de Sousa. My Portuguese is horrible, sorry. In which the ideal of rightful exploitation of the land, mainly by the setting of sugarcane mills, is implicit. For this purpose, it was necessary to repress the hostile tribes, the Tupinambás, and to convert and assimilate the friendly ones. Would you please? I'm not going to read that because I don't want to spoil the beautiful Portuguese language with my rough accent. So, but then you can read. I can read Portuguese, but unfortunately I cannot speak it. So, but you can see there. Yeah, yes, please.
Eu, El Rei, faço saber a vós, Tomé de Sousa, fidalgo de minha casa, que devendo eu para serviço de Deus e meu é conservar e enobrecer as capitanias e populações das terras do Brasil e dar ordem e maneira com que melhor e mais seguramente se possam ir povoando para exalçamento de nossa fé, santa fé e proveito de meus reis e senhorios e dos naturais deles.
Thank you. So there is at the end a compensation for the damage occasioned by the imperial expansion, the salvation of souls, of course. In the case of utopia, this objective is not clearly stated theoretically, given the system on freedom of conscience and religious tolerance in the second book, and page 98, 101, one of the in more eternal edition. And neither in practice, as Raphael Hylodeus was just an isolated member among the millions of utopians. They say, unfortunately, none of us was a priest. But more clearly gives to understand that an ineluctable final action, which will naturally derive from the contact with the Western civilization, would be the Christianization of the land, whose inhabitants, suspiciously, were already ripe and predisposed to receive the gospel. A certain religious tolerance was exerted both by the Spaniards and the Portuguese as derived from the Leyes de Indias, would you please, and the Regimento, as the insistence is always present there that the native be not converted by force, but rather by persuasion and by contact with the colonies. It's something that appears in both documents, that, the Leyes de Indias are many, it's not only one document, are many documents that you can see there. But there is always the insistence that the Indians should inhabit those Indians that are friendly should inhabit side by side with the colonists, so that they could be Christianized and learn by example. But rather the persuasion and by contact with the colonists. From an evolutionary point of view, the religious memes structured in one of the most powerful kinds of meme plexis, religion, were spread from the mind of the colonists to the minds of the colonized. And for good or bad, the confluence in data and the communication provided by the imperial mode of evolution followed. An interesting side, however, of the aforesaid document was the effort to justify the so-called just war. This is something which was debated in Spain in 1511 when King Ferdinand commissioned the Dominican Matthias Parth and the jurist Joan López de Palacios a juridical theological study on the causes for a just war. The two experts concluded that a war against the Native American was just when their chiefs and caciques forbade their free conversion of their subjects, or else when it is necessary to terminate inhuman customs which they are reluctant to abandon, such as cannibalism or human sacrifices to the gods. As to the regimento, it is worth noticing that there is treatment of the topic as well, though in an implicit formulation. In any case, the imperial casuistry for just war greatly matches the same formulation in Utopia. Thomas More devotes 5 pages to this topic as well. What we see here from an evolutionary point of view is that a part of the fight or flight evolutionary drive is operating again through genes and memes, though ideally it should be restrained by the tend and befriend drive in the complementary combination of both replicators. Finally, I will refer to the most essential similarity between the Imperial Endeavour as envisaged in Utopia and in the incipient Iberian colonial empire. Alfred Cave, will you please, has convincingly shown in his article Thomas More and the New World that the utopians portrayed by Thomas More have nothing to do with the Native American presented in the source available to him prior to the writing of Utopia, that is, the book of the New Land, Amerigo Vespucci, Peter Marty D'Angleria, John Raster, rather than being the civilized, reasonable, highly moral, and rational utopians. The West Indians are presented in these sources as brutish, lustful, covetous, ignorant, and cruel. Not always, I must say. Sometimes they are. But the West Indians are notwithstanding present in Utopia. They are wild, beastly, undespicable wild men and women surrounding the isle of the Utopian. They are the barbarians, in a word. And the Utopians show a very suspicious profile, too much like the classical model of Greece in the Lacedaemonian, that is, Spartan version, Lycurgus, or the Athenian version, Pericles. And so, as any kind of civilization, the isle of Utopia has been born out of a primeval art of violence exerted by a dictator over the aboriginals, some of which had been integrated in the realm while some others remain outside. The original art of violence has not concluded. It continues in the constant struggle for more territory, colonies, and to not being wiped out by surrounding hostile and inferior people. For this purpose, the utopians, though trying to soften the rules of war, are also violent and shrewd enough to use less valuable neighbors for their benefits. This, again, is too redolent of the incipient imperial expansion of Spain and Portugal. Does this mean that More has a certain prophetic gift and could foresee the impending imperial action of the Iberian kingdom? Or that he was an exceptional analyst of the sociopolitical and geostrategic relation of his time? I don't think so. To me, the coincidence lies in the fact that More, through his admiration for the classical culture, were more or less consciously reproducing the only model mimetically available to him, the imperial one. In this respect, he is on a par with the Catholic monarchs, with Charles I, with King Emmanuel I, or with King Sebastião, or rather, the political apparatus of the Iberian monarchies. Not everything is bad or good in these empires, or in Thomas More's Utopia. A greater and denser level of interconnectivity was being achieved in this first state of the 4th major stages in the evolution of the sapiens data processing system. But at the cost, of course, this is the bad news, of a great deal of violence, injustice, and suffering of millions of individuals. Then, as today, genes replicating from within the individuals were shaping the way in which memes replicating in society were received and developed, while memes, in their turn, were conditioning the sets of biochemical pathways in the brain of millions of individuals, conducing to either a fight or flight or attend and befriend response. I don't know if I have been successful in my own personal endeavor, but I would like to think that I have been able to sketch a new way of analysis in which the mutually dependent relation between the individual and society is presented in an evolutionary perspective, in which the mimetic part operating intersubjectively in society is the dialectic counterpart of the genetic part operating biologically and psychologically within the individual. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.